Hello, my name's Marjorie. My sister fired me the same week she took over our father's company. No warning, no conversation. Just gone. Like I'd never mattered. But it wasn't just about the job. It was everything that came before it. The silence, the favoritism, the way they smiled to my face while planning my exit behind closed doors. They called her the Golden One. So why was I the only one holding the signature they needed? And if I had stayed quiet, would they have erased me completely? What do you do when your own family treats you like a placeholder? Let me tell you what happened next. It was Sunday morning, and the kitchen smelled like toast and that cinnamon candle I'd forgotten to put out. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Family Board Transition Meeting, Saturday. Saturday, past tense. I blinked at the screen, unsure if it was some glitch. But no, it was real. I hadn't seen the invite, hadn't heard a word. I refreshed my email, checked my spam, even reopened the family group chat. Nothing. I sat still for a moment. A strange kind of quiet crawled up my spine. Not the peaceful kind. No, this was the sound of a door closing, without ever making a sound. How do you miss a meeting you were never told existed? I tapped the mug with my thumbnail, watching the surface ripple. I wasn't sure what bothered me more, the fact that they had met without me, or that no one thought I needed to know. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe I was never meant to be there in the first place. The next morning, I got to the office early, as usual. I nodded to the receptionist, who offered a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something was off. The air was different, thinner maybe. People passed me in the hall, but their eyes skated past mine. Even the intern who used to greet me with "Morning, Ms. Quinn," kept her head down and pretended to be deep in conversation with the vending machine. In the break room, I poured myself a cup of black coffee. Behind me, someone whispered, not low enough. I thought she was already gone. Gone? My badge still opened doors. My name was still on the system. My desk, my files, my team, everything was still where I left it. But the look in their eyes told a different story. They didn't need to announce it. The silence screamed louder. I headed to the legal floor, pretending I needed a form signed, anything to give my hands something to do. I passed Amanda's desk, the legal assistant, and caught a glimpse of an open folder. The letterhead was unmistakable. Roth Enterprises. The bold typeface, CEO appointment, Clarette Alden. Below it, a signature, Jeremiah Roth. Dated last Friday. That same Friday, I thought we were just having a quiet brunch at Dad's house. Scones, fresh strawberries, small talk about the garden. Turns out, while I was cutting fruit, they were cutting me out. I scanned the document again. My name wasn't listed as part of the transition, not on the advisory list, not in the transitional workflow, not even a courtesy CC. They passed the torch. I just wasn't considered flammable enough to burn. I backed away from Amanda's desk without a word. My fingers tingled like I'd just touched a live wire. I walked to the elevator, each step slower than the last. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Inside, I pressed the button for the ground floor and watched the numbers count down. 13, 12, 11. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even blinking, just breathing in a way that didn't feel like breathing anymore. They chose her. They always do. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. From Clarette Alden, subject, Team Realignment Session, Mandatory Attendance Time, Monday, 8 m sharp. Mandatory. How generous. She hadn't spoken to me in person, hadn't sent a courtesy call, but she made sure to schedule me in. For a realignment. The only thing colder than being forgotten is being summoned, like a ghost, back into the room that erased you. I didn't sleep much that night. The kind of tired I felt didn't come from lack of rest. It came from knowing the morning would ask me to stand in a room that had already decided I didn't belong. I laid out my clothes like I was preparing for trial, not a team meeting. I didn't choose black, too dramatic. I wore navy, structured, Sharp, unapologetic. By the time I pulled into the parking garage, the sun hadn't fully cleared the rooftops. I sat in the car a moment longer than necessary, watching a pair of junior analysts walking in, laughing. Neither of them looked my way. Upstairs, the boardroom lights were already on. Everyone was in their seat, coffee cups placed neatly on the table, folders stacked. Clarette stood at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a fitted blazer I'd seen her wear for photo ops. She didn't glance up when I walked in. No nod, no acknowledgement. I took the empty seat near the end, my usual spot. I didn't need to look around to feel the shift in air. This wasn't a meeting, it was an unveiling. She cleared her throat softly. Before we begin, there are some changes we'll be implementing immediately. No one looked surprised. That's when I knew they already knew. She announced a reshuffle of departments, some roles merged, some made redundant. Then she turned directly toward me. Marjorie, we thank you for your years of service, but we're moving forward with a different structure. Effective today, your role has been absorbed. Absorbed. She said it like it was nothing, like it was an outdated feature being removed from a software update. No explanation, no discussion, just done. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I could feel the eyes in the room bouncing between us, trying to look anywhere but directly at me. One man tapped his pen. Another slowly closed his laptop. The only sound was the distant hum of the AC vent overhead. I nodded once, short, clean, and stood. Back in my office, I didn't find an HR rep waiting. No formal paperwork, just a system-generated termination email sitting in my inbox. I read it twice, then closed it. There was nothing in there I didn't already feel. I began packing without urgency. My things didn't take up much space. A framed photo of my mother and me. A small stack of old client thank you notes I'd kept pinned to a corkboard. The magnolia branch paperweight a client had brought me from Savannah. A few personal books. I reached for the whiteboard behind my desk, covered in notes and flowcharts, then stopped. Let them wipe it. When I walked back out into the hall, it felt quieter than usual, though I knew it probably wasn't. I passed the employee recognition wall. My plaque, Strategic Leader of the Year, was gone. In its place, a fresh new face beamed back at me from a shiny brass frame. Not surprising, just fast. The lobby smelled like polished floors and filtered air. I stepped outside, blinking against the sun. It was warm, the kind of warm that sticks to your skin. I sat in my car, not turning the engine on right away. The building stood behind me, like a closed door I hadn't realized was shutting. No one stood up for me, not one of them. Not even the ones I'd trained. The ones I stayed late for, spoke up for in meetings, shielded from fallout when things went sideways. But I didn't cry. If I meant so little to them, why were they so quick to pretend I was never there? I didn't drive home. I wasn't ready to be alone in that kind of quiet. Instead, I took a turn and headed toward the public park near the river. The one my mother used to love. We'd sat on that same bench when I got my first promotion. She brought iced tea in a thermos, and we watched ducks pick through the grass like they had secrets worth sharing. The bench was still there. The tree hadn't changed. I sat down slowly, the wood warm from the morning sun. I let my shoulders relax for the first time that day. I didn't talk, didn't vent. I just breathed in the scent of river water and fresh-cut grass. After a while, I pulled a small notebook from my bag. Flipping past a few pages, I stopped at a blank one and wrote a single word in the middle. Evidence. Not revenge. Not justice. Just truth. Something to hold when everything else felt like it could be edited out. As I capped the pen, my phone lit up. Lucinda Marks. The name surprised me. It had been over a year since we'd spoken. Lucinda was my mother's estate lawyer, and someone who never called unless something needed protection or exposure. Lucinda didn't leave a voicemail, just her name lighting up on my screen like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I let it go to missed calls, then stared at the log for almost a full minute. She didn't call often, never without cause. I figured whatever reason she had could wait until I'd gathered myself enough to think clearly. The rest of the week passed in a strange mix of inertia and raw clarity. I didn't return to the office. There was no office left for me to return to. But I still had access to the company portal, and for reasons I couldn't explain, maybe force of habit, maybe sheer pride. I logged in each morning just to see what would change next. That's how I found out about the upcoming quarterly presentation. Internal livestream, Friday at 10. My name wasn't on the schedule, obviously, but I knew the deck, knew it down to the order of the slides, because I had built the foundation of that roadmap myself. Friday morning, I walked to the cafe 2 blocks from my building. It had wide windows and a quiet corner seat where the noise never quite reached. I ordered a black coffee and a lemon scone. No cream, no sugar. I set my laptop on the table and connected to the Wi-Fi. I told myself I wouldn't watch, but the window opened on its own, like muscle memory. The Roth Company's logo spun in the corner of the screen. Then Clarette appeared, smooth and polished, in a blazer I recognized from a magazine spread she'd done on modern women in leadership. Her posture was pristine, her voice rehearsed. Thank you for joining us this quarter as we redefine what progress means. The screen behind her shifted to the first slide. Growth Roadmap, 2022. My roadmap, my format. The layout I'd spent late nights refining after budget meetings, the one I'd crafted after interviewing clients personally. But there was no mention of me, no nod to the person who built the bones of the strategy. Instead, she smiled and said, "Our new leadership team has worked hard to rethink legacy systems. Innovation must be bold and collaborative." The next image hit harder. A snapshot of the whiteboard from my old office. My handwriting still visible. I remembered the day it was taken. We'd stayed until after 9 p.m., mapping projections, running calculations. I brought pizza. They brought excuses to leave early. Now, that board was evidence, not of my work, but of Clarette's version of team synergy. I closed the window, not out of anger, just because I couldn't give them the courtesy of watching it all. Later, I found myself driving without destination. I passed by the Roth headquarters, out of habit more than intention. The building looked shinier than I remembered, like someone had wiped away fingerprints and memories in one go. 2 new junior execs were taking a selfie in front of the entrance banner. Bold vision, clear future. No one would believe I ever stood at that lobby greeting partners from overseas, explaining the foundation we built. They'd scrubbed that too. Back at home, I turned off my phone and opened the drawer where I kept a forgotten USB. I had labeled it 2 years ago. MQ Roadmap V1. The original project outline. Every milestone, annotated and logged. Slide drafts, voice notes, handwritten memos scanned in from my desk pad. I stared at the timestamps. I hadn't opened these in months. But there they were. Undeniable. And still, not once had anyone called to ask for input. Not even a, "Hey, do you mind if we build on what you did?" I scrolled through line after line. My name, embedded in drafts. Comments tracked back to my logins. But in the real world, the world that was now visible to investors, clients, and new hires, I was invisible. I sat back in my chair. Eyes closed. Had I made it too easy to erase me? Or had they always been waiting for the moment I let my guard down? Around midnight, I found myself still sitting at the desk, the laptop screen dimmed but open. I hadn't eaten dinner, hadn't checked messages. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to remember, not to hurt, but to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined the years I gave them. The sound of an email arriving pulled me back. Subject line: Clarette Alden recognized as visionary CEO behind company turnaround. Internal newsletter. No CC, no personalization. Just a quote, mine, from last year's town hall, repackaged under her name. I didn't react, just saved the article. You can be erased in public, but still exist in the margins of the truth. I didn't touch the article again after saving it. I just let it sit there, unopened, like a scar that hadn't scabbed over. The weekend stretched out ahead of me, quiet and unfinished. I spent Saturday morning cleaning, not because the place needed it, but because I did. Scrubbing down surfaces made more sense than replaying conversations I'd never be able to change. By the time late afternoon settled in, the windows were throwing amber streaks across the floor. I poured a glass of water, sat down at my desk, and opened my hard drive. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just wanted to feel like I still had pieces of myself archived somewhere. And then, there it was. Folder labeled Kingswell Final Drafts. I hadn't opened it since before Dad stepped down. Inside, a file named Kingswell Draft V3, authorized MQ PDF. I clicked. It opened slowly, like it too was trying to decide whether it should exist. The timestamp? Dated 3 weeks before Clarette's announcement as CEO. The signature page? Marked clearly with my name. Not just as a contributor, but as the sole authorized signatory. A clause buried in the final section cited international jurisdictional protections, assigning me, by name, as the only person legally able to execute the final agreement. They didn't just need a team. They needed me. The roadmap, the forecasts, the translation footnotes, all mine. The deal hadn't closed. It was still in pending status, and according to the protocol I helped establish, they couldn't move forward without me. So while Clarette was busy reinventing the company in her image, she'd overlooked the fact that her crown sat on a document with my name at the bottom. I closed the file and sat back. No smile, no triumph, just breath. They had used my voice, my strategy, my structure. Without realizing the foundation was still under my control, I opened my browser and checked internal communications. No one else had touched the Kingswell deal. No reassignment logged. No new point of contact. It had simply stalled. After a moment, I pulled up an old contact, Amir, a Kingswell representative I'd met over coffee at a trade summit 2 years back. We'd kept our conversations professional, light, and consistent. I drafted a short message. Hi Amir, just checking in to verify who's handling final Kingswell documentation now on your side? His reply came 20 minutes later. We were told you were on an extended medical leave. We've been waiting for a revised signature. No anger, no exclamation, just patience. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped out onto my small balcony, letting the breeze pull at the corners of the curtain. From up here, the city was quiet. Boats along the river drifted like they had nowhere urgent to be. Across the water, I could just make out the top of the old port office, a building we once pitched to lease for satellite expansion, another idea Clarette had dismissed as too legacy-minded. I stared at the skyline and felt the shift. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want headlines or retribution. I wanted the truth to land exactly where it needed to, not like a grenade, like gravity. They had spent weeks restructuring a future they couldn't legally finalize. All it would take was a signature, and I was the only one allowed to give it. Back inside, I opened the notebook again. The word evidence sat on the top of the page like a heading. Underneath, I wrote, Kingswell Leverage, do not move yet. Amir contact, keep confidential, document timestamp, verified. I underlined the last line twice. Then I stopped, closed the book. Clarette thought she had the kingdom. But the throne? That was still built on paper I never signed. Just before shutting down my screen, a calendar notification popped up. Kingswell Board Review, Thursday, 10 a.m. Still listed. Still active. No one had removed me. I didn't need to announce anything, not yet. Sometimes power wasn't about speaking louder. It was about being the quiet reason the room couldn't move forward. The calendar alert stayed on my screen like it was daring me to ignore it. I didn't. I opened a new browser tab, logged into the company's back-end system, and let myself scroll through what I shouldn't have had access to anymore. That's when I saw it. My name. Still listed as the authorized signatory on the Kingswell contract. Still attached to the deal Clarette claimed was already done. But it wasn't just still active, it was marked completed. I froze. Not in fear, in calculation. I hadn't signed anything. It was late, just past 9 p.m., but I called Amir anyway. He picked up after 2 rings. "Marjorie," he said cautiously, "I wasn't sure I'd hear from you." I didn't waste time. "Did the contract go through?" There was a short pause, the kind that told me the answer would sting. "Technically, yes. We received a copy with your name on it last week, but honestly, we were hoping you'd follow up. Something felt off." "Send me the file," I said. "Please." It hit my inbox 5 minutes later. The document looked official. The formatting was identical to the one I'd drafted. The cover page was intact. Everything was where it should have been. Until I scrolled down to the final page. My signature stared back at me. Not scanned, not digital, handwritten. It looked close, uncomfortably close, but it wasn't mine. And that was the moment everything changed. I printed 3 copies, one for myself, one for legal, one for whoever tried to lie to my face. The next morning, I drove to Dad's house. Not the office, not the park, not some passive email. This needed to happen face to face. He answered the door, wearing that same old cardigan he always kept in the hallway closet. He looked tired. Not aged, just burdened. We sat in the sunroom. He poured coffee for both of us without asking, like we were still in the version of our family where things were civil. I placed the contract on the table. He read the signature first. Then his eyes scanned the clause I'd underlined in red, the one that made it clear I was the only authorized signer. He didn't say anything right away, just adjusted his glasses and leaned back. "I didn't know," he said finally. "No, you didn't ask." He set the paper down gently, like it might bite. "Why would she do this?" he asked. But it was rhetorical, and we both knew it. "She wants to win," I said, "even if it means breaking things she can't rebuild." He looked away. "Maybe you should speak to her directly." "I already did," I said. "She just doesn't realize it yet." Back at home, I sat down at my desk and opened a new email. 2. General Counsel, subject, unauthorized contract execution, requesting immediate clarification regarding execution of contract Jacte WS Q317, currently listed under my authority. Please confirm who authorized final signature and under what documentation. I hit send. Then I waited. 3 hours later, I received a reply. "We'd like to speak with you directly." No apology, just protocol. It was enough. Later that night, just as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Clarette. "Clarette, what the hell are you doing?" I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back slowly. "Me. Something you should have done before signing my name." There was no reply. That told me everything. The problem with paper trails is, they don't burn easily. The silence after her text was louder than any reply could have been. I didn't need her to admit it. The forged signature, the cover-up, the arrogance. It was all there, between the lines she didn't send. The next morning started slow, the kind of quiet where even the refrigerator hum felt sharp. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. Not a text, a direct call. Elroy Vance. I hadn't heard from him since the last board dinner I'd been pushed out of without explanation. He never called without a reason, I answered. "Elroy." "Marjorie," he said, voice low, clipped. "I won't waste your time." "Good," I said. "I'm running short on patience." He exhaled, quick and audible. "There's movement. Clarette's been in talks with 2 private buyers. She's pushing through a partial equity release under something called Roth Holdings, East Division restructure." I went still. That name wasn't new. I had created it, drafted it as a long-range contingency shell for expansion. It was meant to be a tool. She was now using it as a shield. She's using infrastructure I designed. "We figured as much, and she said you're no longer involved. Told the board she had your blessing." "She's lying." "I assumed." Send me everything you have, I said. Time, date, draft language if possible. I'll forward what I can. But I'm telling you now, if she walks into that investor meeting tomorrow with a pitch deck, there will be consequences. They're already nervous. You know how this works. One slip. She's already slipped, I said. She just hasn't hit the floor yet. After the call, I logged in and went digging. My access was limited, but not gone. They'd forgotten to fully revoke back-end clearance to my archives. Rookie mistake. Folders dated 2 nights ago, file names labeled exploratory, a few stamped internal only. She'd been busy. Pitch outlines, valuation ranges, exit scenarios. Nothing approved, nothing disclosed to the full board. Just quiet threads tying everything to a single direction. Hers. I sat back, staring at a slide where my own formatting was still being used, down to the spacing between bullet points. She hadn't just taken the steering wheel. She'd stolen the whole map. I didn't call her, not yet. Instead, I walked to the window, phone in hand, and took a breath. Not shaky, not panicked, just full. Then I dialed. She answered after 4 rings. "What now?" she asked, like I was the inconvenience. "You need to stop." "Excuse me?" "You're stepping into criminal exposure. You're selling pieces of something you don't fully own, using infrastructure you didn't build." There was a pause. Then that same syrupy confidence I'd come to recognize over the years. "You were great at building things, Marjorie. I'll give you that. But I'm better at making them valuable." My grip on the phone tightened. "You're not adding value, Clarette. You're cashing in on what someone else bled for." She laughed. "Spare me the martyr act." I didn't respond. I just hung up. No more wasted breath. I returned to my desk, opened a secure folder, and began compiling. It took me less than 30 minutes to organize the proof. I labeled it cleanly. Clear subject lines. Chronological layout. Time-stamped backups. Screenshots of draft files, side by side with originals bearing my initials. Then I encrypted the folder and sent it to 3 places. First, Kingswell Legal. Second, Elroy Vance. Third, a private auditor who once worked for my mother. Someone who knew exactly where to look for paper that had been accidentally shredded. The subject line was simple. Foundation Ownership Review. Urgent. The message inside read, "My work has been misused without consent. The attached documents clarify authorship and authority. I'm not seeking a fight. I am ensuring accuracy." After I hit send, I closed the laptop and leaned back. "She moved first," I said out loud to no one, but I kept the receipts. I didn't plan on doing anything else that night. I'd done my part. If they were going to pretend this was a game, I wanted them to realize they were already playing with loaded dice. My phone buzzed again an hour later. "Elroy. If she shows up tomorrow with a pitch deck, she'll be walking into her own audit." I stared at that message, letting the weight of it settle. When you've built something from scratch, you know exactly where to place the fuse. And when it lights, you don't run. You watch who panics first. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't toss and turn either. I just waited. Waited for something to rise in me. Anger, anxiety, regret. But it didn't come. What I felt instead was the eerie stillness of clarity, like I had finally stopped trying to make people good at being decent. Around 7:45 a.m., while the city outside my window was still waking up, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The preview line simply read, "You should have this before tomorrow." It was from Devin Lee, an intern I once mentored 3 years ago. Back then, he was sharp, curious, and always stayed late to ask questions no one else dared to. I hadn't heard from him since he'd left for another department under Clarette's watch. I opened the message. A voice note, 1 line of text. "This was from the leadership session, recorded a year ago. You deserve to hear it." I sat down, plugged in my headphones, and pressed play. It was unmistakably Clarette. "She's good for optics. Makes Dad feel like he's leaving something behind with her around. That's why I keep her visible. She's stable, and that's useful, until she's not." Laughter followed. Not just hers. At least 3 voices in the room. I recognized one of them. Sam Delaney, now on her advisory board. Someone I personally referred when he was still freelancing 2 years ago. I replayed it. Once for disbelief. Again for confirmation. They didn't just remove me. They'd been planning it. And worse, they'd built their confidence on the assumption that I wouldn't fight back. That I was more useful as a placeholder than a presence. There was no rage, no heartbreak, just stillness. Later that morning, I opened my messages and sent a short note to Nadia, someone I once trusted. We used to share rides after late shifts, joke about boardroom politics, roll our eyes at executives who couldn't remember our names. My message was simple. Still think she's going to fix everything? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. 5 minutes passed. Then, please don't drag me into this. I have a family. That was the moment I stopped expecting anything from anyone still in her orbit. You don't need to be stabbed in the back when everyone's already standing behind you pretending not to see the knife. I closed the chat and walked to my desk. The folder I had built over the last few weeks sat ready. Timestamps, emails, audio, and one very old envelope that Lucinda Marks had dropped off the previous spring. I hadn't opened it back then. I didn't need to. I trusted it would matter when it was time. It was time. The Devon recording was first in the presentation deck, then the Kingswell file with my legal authority. Next, a breakdown of the shell company Clarette had tried to slide past the board, using infrastructure I had personally set up and trademarked. Finally, a copy of the clause from my mother's estate, still sealed, still binding. I didn't want to blow the room up. That would have been easy. I wanted to walk in, lay the facts down, and let the weight of them shift everything she had built with smoke and mirrors. Around 6 p.m., I walked to the park near my apartment, the one my mother loved. I sat at our old bench, beneath the same oak tree, and stared across the river. I thought of her handwriting, the way she signed her name like a woman who didn't need permission. "You're going to have to do this alone, Marjorie," she once told me, "but that doesn't mean you'll be alone forever." I stood, brushed off my coat, and made my way back home. As I walked through my door, a ping echoed from my laptop. I didn't rush to it. I made tea first, then opened the email. Subject: Updated agenda. Kingswell board meeting, 10:00 a.m. Company status update. CEO, Clarette Alden, 10:30 a.m. Independent review session, Marjorie Quinn. There it was. Official. They hadn't removed me. They hadn't dared. Not because they respected me, because they knew I still mattered. Even if they couldn't say it out loud. You can bury someone's name in the agenda, but if they show up in the minutes, it's already too late. I didn't speak a word on the drive to the Kingswell building. There was nothing left to rehearse. I'd already lived it. Every slide, every timestamp, every buried clause. They weren't strategy anymore. They were memory. The air in the boardroom was too still when I walked in. 5 minutes early, and yet somehow, they'd already settled into their chairs like they'd been waiting longer. A few side glances. No one met my eye directly. Except Clarette. She was already seated at the head of the table, wearing that pearl gray suit she always chose for victory days. Her lips curved into a polite line that didn't reach her eyes. Jeremiah sat 2 seats away, his hands folded. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just unreadable. No one said anything as I took my seat. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I simply opened the slim leather folder I'd brought with me and placed it gently on the table. At exactly 10 o'clock, the moderator cleared his throat. "Welcome, everyone. We'll begin with a company update from our CEO, Clarette Alden." Clarette stood and launched into her presentation like it was just another quarterly review. Charts, talking points, polished metaphors. I watched her move through the deck smoothly, efficiently, until she hit the Kingswell slide. Her voice faltered for just a breath. Then she pushed on, highlighting projected revenue shifts and synergistic restructuring. Her phrasing was textbook. Her timing, rushed. I didn't blink. At 10:30, the moderator looked at me. "We'll now hear from Marjorie Quinn regarding review concerns." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I opened the folder and removed a flash drive. Before I speak, I'd like you all to hear something. The room fell still. I played Devon's recording from my phone, hooked through the built-in speaker system. Clarette's voice filled the space. She's good for continuity optics. Dad likes to think she's stable. That's why I keep her visible. Then laughter. I paused the audio before the second half could land harder. Silence. This wasn't a private opinion. This was spoken in a leadership session, attended by several current advisors. I handed printed transcripts down both sides of the table. Then the forged contract. This, I said, is not my handwriting. I passed it alongside the original version, signatures side by side. These are not personal wounds, they're legal violations. The signature on the executed Kingswell deal was not mine, and I have never delegated authority to substitute it. I turned toward Clarette, her face set, jaw tight. And for the record, I continued, the Roth East shell, which was referenced in the investor pitch last week, was built using IP associated with my estate, registered, documented, and protected. No release was ever granted. No one spoke. It wasn't necessary. Then Jeremiah cleared his throat. There are mistakes, he began quietly, that a CEO makes and recovers from. And then there are mistakes a father makes that echo in his daughter's silence. He looked directly at Clarette. You weren't chosen because you were ready. You were chosen because I thought she wouldn't fight back. Then to me, I should have asked more, trusted more, listened more. I'm sorry. I said nothing. But I didn't look away. The moderator looked unsure whether to continue, but before he could speak, the side door opened. Lucinda Marks walked in, a folder in hand. She nodded to me, then addressed the board. This document was drafted by Verity Quinn 5 years ago. It outlines a contingency. Should any attempt be made to dissolve or restructure family assets, a controlling percentage of shares would transfer to Marjorie Quinn. She laid the document flat. 40%, effective immediately. No one interrupted her. Clarette's gaze stayed locked on the table. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The board voted. It wasn't dramatic. A simple count. Formal, clean. Clarette was suspended, pending legal review. As the room began to clear, I gathered my things slowly. I didn't linger. Didn't need to. But in the hallway, just as I rounded the corner toward the elevator, she stopped me. You think this is over? I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel small standing next to her. It ended the moment you forged my name, I said. Everything since then was just paperwork. She didn't reply. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button. The doors closed quietly between us. Rebuilding doesn't begin with winning. It begins with remembering why you stayed quiet for so long. When the elevator doors opened on the lobby floor, I didn't walk out like someone who had won anything. I walked like someone who had stopped expecting the win to look like applause. A week passed. The kind of week where everything around you continues moving, but you feel like a ghost floating just outside of it. I didn't call anyone. I didn't rush to announce what happened. The only sound I held onto was my own breath. By the following Monday, I returned to the Roth building, not as a guest, not as a relic, not even as a story. I came in because there was work to do. There were no cameras waiting at the front entrance. No press, no board members waiting to shake hands. Just the receptionist who gave me a small nod and said, "Welcome back, Ms. Quinn." It landed softly, like something that had always been true and was finally said out loud. Upstairs, the lights were already on in the transition suite. Someone had placed a folder on my desk labeled Client Strategy, Interim Lead. Inside, files, timelines, access codes. No longer acting, no longer former. I opened the top drawer. My old pen was still there. Not everything had been erased. Around midday, an internal memo circulated, a formal note from the board summarizing the shift. Clarette was listed as suspended pending internal investigation. The wording was measured, no dramatics, but it didn't need drama. Everyone in that building knew what happened. Quiet messages trickled into my inbox. Glad you're back. You handled it better than most would have. Thanks for showing what restraint looks like. No apologies. No ownership from the ones who sat silent while I was gutted from the inside out. But something in their tone was different. Like they were writing to someone who had survived something they hadn't expected her to survive. I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need to. They'd seen what they needed to see. Later that afternoon, Jeremiah came to my office, alone. No assistant trailing behind him, no prepared speech, just him, holding a small envelope. He placed it on the desk without sitting. "It was in your mother's things," he said. "She asked me to give it to you if things ever got too far." I nodded once. Then he lingered, like he might say more. But he didn't. He left the way people do when they know they've said too little, too late. I waited a long while before opening the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My mother's handwriting filled it in blue ink, steady and elegant. "If this ever lands in your hands," it read, "I trust you'll know what to do with the weight I couldn't carry. You always had a stronger back than I did. I'm sorry I didn't say that out loud." I folded the note and slid it into the notebook where I'd once written evidence. It no longer felt like proof. It felt like closure she never got to deliver. Before heading home, I walked out through the courtyard. The building buzzed behind me, people rushing meetings, voices bouncing down hallways. But outside, it was still. I took the longer path past the east side of the property, near the garden my mother used to tend. I hadn't been there since she passed. I didn't expect much, but the magnolias were blooming, early and full. I crouched beside the one she planted the year I turned 20, ran my hand along a leaf. "You kept it going longer than anyone gave you credit for," I whispered. "I guess I did too." I stood, brushed the dirt from my hands, and exhaled. Not in grief, in recognition. The story wasn't over, but the chapter was closed. I didn't smile, but I didn't flinch either. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer owned my name. Sometimes you don't win with noise. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stay steady, gather the truth, and let it speak for you. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that being underestimated isn't always a weakness. It's often a gift. It gives you space to move quietly, to build quietly, and when the time comes, to rise without needing permission. To anyone out there who's ever been overlooked, erased, or told to be grateful for being included, let me tell you this. Your presence is not a favor, it's a foundation. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they're more comfortable without your voice. And now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, only to realize it cost you more than your voice? Or maybe you were the one who finally stood up when nobody else did. Let's talk about it. If this story moved you, even just a little, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if it didn't sit right with you, I still want to hear why. Your voice matters here. And if you'd like more real, honest stories like this, stories that reflect the grit, grace, and quiet strength of everyday people, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for the next one. Because out here, we don't just tell stories. We remember who we are and why that still matters.